What's up, everybody? We're the Hills Maniacs, and today we're going to be continuing our John Wick movie rewatch with John Wick Chapter 2. So if you caught our video last week, we did a review of the first John Wick movie and kind of talked about what we liked about it, etc. And the reason we're doing this is to get ready for the fourth installment, John Wick Chapter 4. So the next couple videos you see on this channel will all be about the John Wick movies. So if you're a fan of John Wick, then check those out and subscribe to our channel to catch each one as we go. We'll of course review Chapter 3 Parabellum, and then the new fourth one when it comes out. As of this recording, it'll be next Friday, so keep an eye out for that. The video will be up Saturday, I think, but the movie itself comes out on Friday, so keep an eye out for all of that. But what did you think about the John Wick Chapter 2, like, compared to the first John Wick movie, you know?
For me, I mean, it was, I said in the last one that they kind of get better as they go, and it is true. John Wick Chapter 2, I think, is better than the first one. But I think that's because we now have an understanding of who John Wick is, what he's basically fighting for, and we get that sense of what happens in that criminal world that we mentioned in the last video, with the continental stuff and the different crime organizations, and we're introduced to, I guess, the table, or the high table, as they're called in this, where I guess it's different crime families, if you will, and they all kind of get together and run the crime organization, and whatever they say goes, and they're like the top of the top. So this movie basically is about the John Wick gets hired by this guy who wants his sister's seat at the table, and so John Wick has to basically kill his sister in order to give this guy that seat, because it'll pass to him, in the family.
And it's like the result of a blood oath, because John owes this guy from something that he did in the past.
To help him, if you watch the first one, they mention about John Wick doing an impossible task and getting out of that world and being able to go live a normal life. And I guess this guy helped him in some way to accomplish that goal. And now he's cashing in that what they call it, a marker.
Yeah, the marker,
where I guess you basically
oath,
just you like prick your finger and put the blood, and then it's kind of like the blood pact between Dumbledore and Grindelwald, where they said they couldn't fight each other in Fantastic Beasts. So you get that, and I guess this happens a lot in this world, because John Wick uses one later on in Chapter 3, to get help from somebody that he needed. He cashes in a marker that he had from somebody else or something. So I guess that's one of the main rules, I guess, of this crime world, is that no business is to be conducted on continental grounds, and B, all markers must be honored. And so that's basically the whole premise of this movie, is John is trying to fight with this, like, I don't want to get back into this world. I kind of want to just stay out of it and stay retired, as they say. But he can't now because of what happened in the first one. The guy knows that he's willing to come back, because he came back for revenge in the first one. And then it ends up backfiring on the guy that hires John Wick, like it always does. I think overall the movie itself was a lot better. We saw a lot more like fighting. We saw a lot more of John Wick's knowledge of different weapons and things. Like I think he uses an AR-15 or an AK-47 or something, one of those assault rifles. He uses a shotgun. He uses a bunch of handguns.
Right, because in the first one we mainly only saw him use like one handgun and maybe
he actually
some
kills
knives
people with a pencil
whatever.
too.
Yeah, in this one, yeah. But yeah, I mean, we do get a look at all that kind of stuff, and I like that it does kind of pick up right where the first one left off. Like, this literally starts off with him going to get his car back that was stolen from him in the first one, because the what was his name, Yosef from the first movie, the one that stole John Wick's car and killed his dog. He took the car to a chop shop or whatever to be repaired, but it was hit to his uncle, basically.
Right.
So then John Wick tracks it down and goes there to get his car back at the beginning of this one, because we never saw him do that at anywhere during the first one.
He got
a different car
from the guy he went to.
So I like that they picked up immediately with that. Like, that's how the movie starts, is him getting his car back, and then he literally goes and buries his guns again, everything else. He wants to retire, and he's just sitting there. I don't know how long after the first movie that was that he went and got his car. It could have been a week, a couple days, whatever.
I mean, I think it wasn't too long, because they had said that he basically just killed that guy's brother, which was,
so it was fairly recent. But I like that, because then he pretty much sits down in the basement, and that's when his doorbell rings, like right after he finished burying his guns. It's like, oh, now I got to get back into this world. So I like it picked up in that sort of way.
Well, and I like that they do that. They do it at the beginning of part 3, too. This movie ends, basically, and I don't really want to spoil anything, but John Wick goes back on the run, in a way. And there's reasons for it. You'll have to watch the movie to find out, because I don't want to go too in depth and ruin it for you. But he goes back on the run, and then it kind of cuts off, and part 3 picks up right there where he's on the run and he's trying to get access to different things and whatever, and that's where he ends up, going and doing that marker thing that we talked about earlier. So I like that continuity, and I hope part 4 continues that and picks up right where he left off in part 3.
Right. I mean, I'm sure it will, because it seems to be a continuous story.
Right. And that's what I like too, is that this is, if you watch parts 1 through 4, it is basically one continuous story. The Santino de Antonio, which is the main antagonist of this movie, the guy that brings him back in with the marker and blows up his house.
People gotta blow up his stuff.
The reason he didn't go to John Wick before was because he was honoring his retirement. He said, all right, he's retired, I'll leave him go, I won't get him to do this marker. And his father was still alive and still had the seat at the table. Once his father died and his sister got the seat at the high table, he kind of like, well, I want the seat, and I need to hire somebody to kill my sister so I can get it. And that's when he's like, well, I heard John Wick came back and killed so-and-so, so I'll go to him, and he has to honor this marker. So he brings him back into that because of the events of the first one, and I kind of like that it does play an important role in this movie, because John Wick is now basically officially back because of what he did in the first movie. So.
See, and I kind of like, though, too, that this movie doesn't necessarily lean too heavily on the previous movie. Like, it's basically like, if they just didn't have the first movie, they still could have made this one work. Like, through a series of flashbacks, you can tell us, like, oh, John Wick is this normal guy, he lost his wife, whatever, and then the guy brings the, or Santino D'Antonio, or whatever his name was, brings the blood oath to him, like, I need you to get back into this world, and that could have still, the plot could have still worked without him having his dog killed and getting his car back like in the first one. The plot still kind of makes sense, because you get this mysterious guy coming in, like, you owe me from this previous whatever, and then I'm sure they would find a way to explain it, and it would still fit. Like, I felt like either way, just like I said in the previous review of the first movie, I said that one felt like a standalone movie, because he kind of gets his, he sort of has the happy ending where he gets a dog at the end. He gets revenge on the people that killed his dog and took his car and everything else. This one also could have been a good starting point to the John Wick series, and I don't think it would have ruined it or, like, ruined the story they were trying to tell from the first one. Because even in this one, his house gets blown up. That could be where his dog and his car his car gets blown up and his dog dies in the house explosion or whatever. I feel like it could have worked either way, and that's what I thought was so interesting about this movie, was that even though they had the previous one, this one still felt like at the start of a trilogy, because now they have a fourth one. You got 2, 3, and 4 are their own movies, and the first one was just kind of an introduction to the characters. So I feel like they could have combined both of those together and still made it work.
I mean, I am okay with what they did in this, though. I think it worked. Like you said, it did work both ways. but I like that it still does connect. Like, they had one before this, because the first one gave me that kind of like, ooh, this guy's cool, you know, and it showed us like who he was, and gave us that introduction. And normally, you know, these kind of like introduction movies are kind of like slow and like, you know, whatever, because they're more focused on telling the backstory of the person rather than the now of the person, you know. But with John Wick, it was kind of the opposite. They did a lot of flashbacks and referenced it throughout the first movie, but then they were like, this is now, this is, you know, yes, this is why he's doing this, but he's in the now and we're focusing on the now. And then when it picks up right after that, and a lot of that, you know, him losing his wife and car and dog, especially at the beginning, when he's going back after his car and stuff, you know, it plays back into that. And so I kind of like that there is a first movie and that this was the second part, because it just kind of gave us that, like, I want more after the first one. I don't think I would have got that. Like, had I just watched this one first, I would have been like, okay, it was a, you know, John Wick's cool and stuff. And I mean, yeah, it does leave you on a cliffhanger, like, ooh, what's gonna happen next? But it's just like, oh yeah, this was a movie. That first one, though, when it ended, you know, and he got the new dog and stuff, and then it's like, well, now he has a mission, because now he's got to go find his car. Now he's going to track down anybody else that might have been associated with the game, or people going to retaliate against him. Is the guy's family going to come back after? You didn't know what was going to happen in part 2, you know. Whereas this one, it was just kind of like, you know, you get to the end and it's like, yeah, there's a suspenseful ending and stuff, but throughout the movie, it was just kind of like, yeah, okay, you know, if this was a standalone film, it wouldn't have been horrible, but, you know, it wouldn't have been as good without that first one, I think.
Right. I'm not saying it's a bad thing that they had that first one. I'm just saying if they had decided to go with this one as the first one, they could have taken, like, the beginning portion of that movie, but right before his dog gets killed and the plot gets set into motion, and just kind of, like,
I think that's kind of cramming too much in, though.
Cram that in there to kind of give the backstory, and then they could have added on an extra 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah, but I mean, you don't want to make the movie too convoluted, though, either, with jumping back and forth and, like, a flashback and then now, and a flashback and now, and a flashback and now.
No, I'm not saying they do that, but
you want to keep it all just flowing forward, so I don't think they needed to cram all that in here as the backstory.
I kind of like the first one better than this one, I guess. Just because more like the plot seemed to make more sense in the first one. I mean, it was convenient, like I mentioned in last week's video,
right?
Or in our last video we did, that I mentioned how it was convenient how the movie kind of kicked off, because if he would have never gone to that gas station, he would have never run into Yosef, and Yosef would have never been like, oh, I want that car type of thing, you know.
I mean, this movie's convenient.
This one was, I mean, this one at least made more sense, like, to set up the plot, though. Right. It wasn't convenient, because it made sense. A guy is coming here to...
Right.
Like, that could happen at any time, whereas the other thing is convenient, like, they just happen to be at the same gas station together.
Right.
I guess what I'm saying is I like the intro to this movie better. I mean, after the part after he gets his car back and stuff, like, when he brings the blood oath to John Wick, that intro... I like that better than how they set up the plot of the first one. But I kind of just like the first movie better, because it doesn't make you have to watch the sequels. Like, it doesn't set up a sequel, you know, necessarily. Like, he just gets revenge at the end. It's just fun. It was such a fun movie that it's like, we want a sequel and we'll see what we can do. And then they make the sequel, and now these 3 sequels, 2, 3, and 4, are connected to each other. But my biggest problem with this movie, though, I think, is that there doesn't seem to be any, like, not necessarily consequences for what they do, but, like, nobody notices anything that happens. Like, literally, they have a shootout in a public place because Santino betrays John after John does does do what he asked him to do to fulfill the blood oath. He still goes after John anyways, because he doesn't want to have any loose ends. So he sends a bounty out for John Wick, just as people do. For some reason, they tried that in the first movie too.
They can kill John Wick.
You know. But there's a big, you know, he's like fighting these people in crowded areas, like an airport or a train station and stuff like that, and people are getting shot and killed, and all the crowd of people around them is doing is kind of just running around screaming. They're not There's no police that show up really to do anything, or there were like 2 cops I think that showed up near the end of the fight scene or whatever, but then they got killed anyway.
Well, they weren't even real cops either.
Yeah, they were
working for Santino.
Yeah. So it's like it kind of just feels like it takes away from it a little bit when you realize there's no real world consequences to these kind of things. Like, where are the cops? Why aren't there cops showing up to take that? Like, it'd be better if like John Wick escapes and then the cops come and like arrest some of the bounty hunters that are coming after him or something like that. Or I'd like to see John Wick escape prison or whatever. Least, I think that would make for a fun scene too.
Or at least show, like somebody finding all the bodies and being like, oh, something happened here, or whatever.
Right.
Like,
they don't
just
even
show something, but they don't even show, like, who, I know the criminal world has their own like cleaning crew. We mentioned it in the last one, the last video, but I doubt that they'll be able to go everywhere like that and clean up especially that many dead bodies,
especially in public places like that.
Like you can't shut down a subway station so that these people can come in and take out these dead bodies. Like,
especially one of them got killed on the train.
Yeah, like, so it's just, I mean, it is. You're right. It is kind of just like that's kind of like a weird plot hole type thing that's just kind of thrown in there, but it does lead for some cool scenes. I mean, there's a scene in a tunnel where John Wick's running through, after he does what he was supposed to for the marker. He's running through these, what they called the catacombs, I think, like under the palace and stuff.
Right.
And he goes through this giant shootout with these different people, Santino's people plus his sister's people, and it was just this whole thing. And it has one of the best scenes in the John Wick movies, where he reloads a shotgun on the guy's chest just to shoot him with the same shotgun. And it was hilarious because he just like pushes him down, holds him down with the gun, reloads it, and then shoots him. And it was hilarious. It was a great scene. And it's just, I mean, just any of those really like shootout scenes in any of these movies, they are kind of cool because it shows the different ways John Wick, if he knows he's out of ammo and doesn't have any more, then he hides around a corner and trips the guy and takes his gun and uses his thing and then takes his his clips for his gun or whatever, or he'll like he'll use a pencil or a knife or whatever,
whatever he can find.
And we see even in the third one he uses it a lot more. So it's just kind of cool how they still incorporate that, like, different ways that John Wick, just to show you that he's not only masterful with a gun of any kind, but he is also just a good fighter, and that's what really builds up that John Wick being like this, what they call the boogeyman, this master assassin in a way. Is that they're able to show that, and so it's not like an exaggeration of what he can do because it shows us what he can do, so when they call him the boogeyman, or they say like, oh, you can't kill John Wick, well, we can see why they can't kill John Wick, because the dude can do pretty much anything. So I like that they have that, and the third one gets a lot more into that type of thing again, so that it's just really cool that each movie kind of builds on that and gives us a lot more scenes that involve him finding unique ways to defend himself.
And again, another thing that also doesn't make sense, like you mentioned from the first movie, is that if the rules of the Continental are that you can't conduct business on Continental grounds, this means you can't really fight anybody or shoot anybody on the in the Continental.
Anything that happened outside has to stay outside,
which is what we see in this one. They fall he's fighting with somebody and they fall through the window into the Continental, and then they both just like get up and have a drink,
like, because hey guys, you can't do that.
They're not allowed to do that.
Right.
But with that rule being in play, it's like, well, at the end of the movie, or even throughout the movie, when John Wick is being targeted by all these bounty hunters, it's like, why doesn't he just stay in the hotel? He literally is in the hotel at one point and just leave.
I guess it's because they use gold coins in the criminal
it could
underworld,
be, yeah.
And you do still have, even if you're just there for a visit, you still have to pay for however many nights you're staying. And I guess if he only has like 5 gold coins with him, and
Yeah,
each night he has to pay one. He can only stay for 5 nights before somebody says, "Hey, you gotta leave."
Yeah, but we see people come in there that aren't staying, like the guy he was
right.
fighting.
Well, no,
with
they don't have
staying.
to be staying, but they can if they choose to.
Why can't they just sit in the lobby
but they have
5
to
days,
they have to leave or whatever. So it's there are still, like, it's still like a hotel. Like, you still have to kind of check in and check out. They'll ask you to leave at some point. So I guess that's like, kind of why they never really explain it, but that's probably why, because you have to basically pay to stay there.
Weird, though.
Because he even calls the front desk when he's at the Paris one and says, "Let the management know that I'll be checking out in the morning." And they do use it as a normal hotel, so they would need room for, you can't stay in one room your whole life. Like, somebody has to use that room as part of the Continental.
I know, I'm just saying
they have to make sure they clean it.
It just seems strange that, like, nobody thinks to, like, well, how long could he have stayed there if he only had 5 coins? Just stay there for 5 days, let the bounty hunter, like, thing die down a little bit or whatever, I just don't get. He, like, leaves immediately. Like, why not heal your wounds for a couple days or something? Just stay there and relax, whatever. But even the criminals don't really, like, stay in the Continental when John Wick's going after them either.
No, but they honor the rules. That's the best part.
It just seems like it's kind of a weird mix sort of thing. It's like, well, they can stay there and they know that there's these rules in place, but why don't they?
Yeah, I mean, it
and I do
sense.
like that they showed us that there are Continental hotels in other countries and stuff too, like, because they're in Paris or wherever they are in this one.
There's a French one.
There's one there. There's one in America, obviously, in New York, where we saw. I'm guessing there's one in, like, every major city, so that criminals can just go there at any time.
Yeah, that is kind of cool. I also like that this one introduced us to some new characters along with the returning characters, Winston and all them. But we got the manager of the Paris hotel. We also got Lawrence Fishburne's character being the Bowery King, I guess is what he's called.
He runs a homeless network, thing.
They're like an underground kind of thing, but he uses basically, like, homeless people to do what he needs done. Right. But I like too that him and John also have a backstory. It wasn't just kind of like he's here, he'll help John Wick.
Who is this guy?
They explain in the movie how they met before and how they fought against each other and stuff. And then, there ends up, from Santino's bounty being on John Wick, it was up to 7 million. So he says, "Yeah, I'll help you. I'll give you a gun. You get 7 bullets. One for each thing." Yeah. And I like the continuity that they keep up. Like I said in the first one, where it actually shows him reloading and having to get new weapons and stuff, you can count he fires the 7 bullets and then needs a new gun.
Yeah, they stuck to what they did in the first one and sort of added to it and everything else.
Right.
I mean, overall, I don't know. I didn't like this movie as much as the first one, I guess. Like I said, that was more of just a standalone film.
I can see that.
But as a sequel, this one, I mean, it did all right. I'd say the third one is even, like you said, it gets better and better.
The third one is definitely better.
I do like that it ended on the cliffhanger ending, like you mentioned earlier. Other than that, I mean, I'd give this like a 4 out of 5 if I were to rate it. I gave the last one a 4.5 just because I enjoyed that movie a lot and the plot just seemed to make sense and everything else. And this one was basically just the first one continued, sort of. So it wasn't like it was its own movie. Like, you kind of had to know what happened in the first one, because that's where you get the introduction of who John Wick is.
Right. I'd said that they get better as they go, and they kind of do. I mean, plot-wise, I like this one better than the original. Because, like you said, it kind of builds that, that going on. But, and for fight scenes and like the different, innovative stuff that John Wick does in this one, I like it better. But there are parts of it that are a lot slower, and it's just kind of like talking and whatever else. And so I think overall the first one's probably better, but if you look at the specific aspects of the second one, I think it would be pretty close to being better than the first one. But I think I'd like it a little bit less. I'll do that. Just as an overall, I'll say the first one's a little bit better than this one.
Right.
But this one's still a good movie. You know, I'm not going to say it, but I really like the third one. So we'll get into that in the next one.
Like I said, though, this one had a sort of better introduction in this movie compared to the first one. Like, just at least the way the plot kicks off compared to the first one is better.
Right.
But the first movie overall, for me, was a lot better in terms of the plot, I guess, in my opinion. But let us know what you guys thought of John Wick Chapter 2 down in the comments section. Also, give us your thoughts on the first one as well. Also, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more.
Remember, always honor your markers and never conduct business on continental grounds. And we'll see you guys in the next one.
Bye guys.